Welcome to the M&A Zing, the show for acquisition entrepreneurs, search funders and holdco builders across the UK and Europe. Each week we dive into the real world stories, strategies and challenges behind buying and building small businesses. Whether you're searching for your first deal or running a growing group of companies, this is your space to learn, share and get inspired. I am joined this week, as ever, by my effervescent co-host, Gareth Hawkins. Gareth, how are you?
I'm effervescing. I feel like 1,000 milligram vitamin C tablet buzzing away in water, which is actually what I need at the moment because I am thick with cold. So when I think of effervescing, I think of salvation.
Okay, well, hopefully it can save you.
Please.
We've got a really exciting week this week, so we're doing a slightly different format. We're going to do what we're calling a buy-side breakdown. So we're looking at a company that is for sale and delving into the details therein. But before we get into that, Gareth, can you kick us off with the news?
Yeah, I mean, there's loads going on in this last week. It's clearly the beginning of a new fiscal year, and there's lots of pent-up activity that seems to have been released at this threshold. And we won't talk about Trump and tariffs, so less said about that, the better. But yeah, here we are, 9th of April. I guess the big news is that the team formerly of Ethos Partners Search Fund activities, Joe Coburn, Scott Bannerman, Sandy Farmer, Pascal Willett, they're all formerly Ethos Partners. They have bought out the search fund activity and relaunched anew as Orca Equity Partners.
Exciting.
Loving the Orca pod idea. They were probably one of the first and most prolific team of investors in UK search funds at Ethos. And I sincerely hope that they're going to continue to be a huge catalyst for the UK scene. But super exciting that they're now under their own steam and going to go on to bigger and stronger under this new brand.
That is super exciting news. Well, my news is from Maci Search Capital. So it's a search fund led by a UK-based Croatian Cambridge and LBS alum, Philip Tremack. They've closed their search phase funding round and they're now embarked on finding B2B software, business services and light manufacturing companies to acquire. So Philip's a super interesting guy. He was a mechanical engineer turned management consultant, then a PE investor, and is now, in his own words, chasing his dream of acquiring a company and preserving a legacy. So congratulations, Philip, on closing the round.
What a great journey, and actually what a great preparation to embark on becoming an operator of a software or services or light manufacturing company. I mean, if he's got a mechanical engineering and management consultancy background, he's well equipped, I think.
I would say so. Yeah, absolutely. It's almost a perfect pipeline. So yeah, very excited to see what he does in the space.
Yeah, exactly. And speaking of being well equipped, Soclofi, a French-based management buy-in venture led by Sébastien Vuillot, who is actually ex-McKinsey Orfos and has recently closed their search phase capital raise, have now launched properly in public and are out there seeking acquisition opportunities, specifically in France, French-speaking Belgium and Switzerland. What's really interesting about Soclofi is just how many of the sort of good and the great, if you will, in the search fund investment scene have backed him. 17 acquisition investors, including Will Thorndike and Tobias Raber from 40 Search Partners. Yeah, there's quite a few on there. So lovely to see the sort of continuation of more search funds launching in France.
Exciting. We'd love to see and hear more news from Europe.
More to come.
More to come. Well, okay, so some more news. So Oryx Legacy is a search fund led by a gentleman called Adam Giansiracusa, are seeking a company based in the UAE to acquire and operate. So they've just closed their search phase funding round as well. And we are hoping to speak to Adam soon on the pod, hear about the ETA and search scene in the GCC. So that's going to be an interesting episode.
Yeah. I mean, you think about the GCC and perhaps wrongly, you think it sort of hasn't got as much history. I mean, in terms of like businesses and generational businesses. It's got plenty of history, but has it got as much of the sort of generational wealth transfer opportunity as the European and American scenes have? I imagine it has, but it's sort of maybe not as forefront in people's minds. So I'm really hoping that Adam can educate us on that and tell us what's going on over there in terms of who's backing who, and what kind of opportunities he sees in country.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's one of those things that you kind of imagine, the year 2000 was a couple of years ago, but it's actually 20 years ago. Businesses in the GCC that started in, the 80s and 90s are 30, 40 years old now. So
that's true. That's true.
Yeah.
So there is a vintage there to go after. So I'm sure he's well equipped. Okay. Well, so the last piece of search fund news is about the launch of Tembo Search Partners in Germany. We talked recently about other search investors in Germany. This is a brand new one led by Christian Giger and Benedikt von Hatzfeldt. They launched recently and are already backing 2 search entrepreneurs that are leading acquisitions into some pretty interesting deals in Germany in the electrical and electronic spaces. What I quite like, having spoken to Christian about the model at Tembo, is that they uniquely provide all of the search capital to their acquisition entrepreneurs. Okay. So they kind of solve that problem and provide infrastructure and tools to help in the search. So really quite hands-on. But they do that at not Stanford traditional search fund terms. So the terms are actually more favorable for the entrepreneur. Yeah, so the 1.5x preference is not necessarily obligated in this model for them. So that's really decent. But they only take themselves 10% equity in the acquisition, and then they bring their investors and co-investors along to capitalize the project. So really great for the German Mittelstand. Really interesting to hear from Christian. I hope that at some point we'll get to meet up or have him on the pod to talk about the emerging German scene. But really great to see Tembo now out there backing projects.
Yeah, I would love to get Christian on to talk about that. That'd be really interesting.
The highlight from my chat with him was about the difference between the multiples paid in Germany versus the multiples paid in the UK, and the other side of the coin being the cost of commercial finance in both those countries. So he was quite shocked to hear that sort of 12% was the going rate here for senior debt, when in Germany it's more like 6 to 8%. Thank you, ECB versus the BOE. But also he was quite shocked to hear just how low our multiples, or how compressed our multiples are here. Averaging 3 to 4 here versus 5 to 6 in Germany. So you win on the swings, you lose on the roundabouts. But quite eye-opening how the two geographies differ in that sense.
Well, absolutely. That leads me on to my final piece of news. So Ian Rees of Premier Meaton, Adrian Godson, UK Equity Income Fund Manager at Jupiter, and Richard Penny of Oberon Investments were talking on the Financial Times Advisor podcast, and they were talking about how many sort of mid and small cap UK companies trade at a considerable discount of 20-25% relative to their global peers. So it's interesting, like you say, the kind of discount that we have here compared to our international brothers and sisters.
Yeah, it's inherent, I think. I mean, we see that on the public markets in the UK, that in a normal year there is this sort of compressed valuation, unfortunately inherent in UK companies right now. So that's probably why there's so much US and Gulf capital that's come in to do kind of take privates, if you will, in the UK, because you can take a listed company in the UK private and then relist it in the States and make an arbitrage just out of moving it to a more buoyant economy. Interesting. But that does seem to trickle down into the private markets as well, and hence why we see, I think, these compressed multiples in the UK. That, and it's needlessly complicated and costly to get a deal done here, so it's not exactly a seller's market in the privates. But let's hope that playing field evolves. But really interesting to hear those guys having that conversation and coming to the same conclusion that the UK small cap private market is abundant with opportunity. Cool. Right. Well, we'll get into our main topic, shall we? Our buy side breakdown.
Yes.
At random, seemingly at random, we have picked from businessesforsale.com, actually, an online retailer of power and hand tools, so industrial equipment, if you like. This leapt out to us, largely to me, because this was the space that I cut my teeth in. So this is where I did a fair bit of M&A and had an exit. This is, we were supplying to online resellers as well as traditional bricks and mortar resellers.
Okay.
But yeah, this one's being represented by Turner Butler, and it's a 30-year-old company that is a respected supplier through eBay shops and Amazon, as well as, I guess, from their industrial unit somewhere in the industrial estates of the UK, where they supply workshop and garage equipment products, doing about 1.2 million in revenue, from which their adjusted EBITDA is about 230k. And they have an asking price of 500k plus stock. And interestingly, they want stock at value, the book value of the stock, which maybe we'll come on to.
That's quite interesting, the kind of split of asking price and then full price stock. Is that something that, I mean, that's not something I've ever come across before. Is that something you've seen before?
Yeah, it's fairly normal for a distribution company to be having its, you buy the assets alongside, if you will. You'll give a kind of P&L valuation on a multiple of profit, and then you'll buy the assets. In this case, obviously, the assets are the inventory. But what's quite telling about this transaction is that they seem to feel that they can get full price for the inventory, and I don't think I've ever paid full price for inventory in my life, because normally what you're getting with inventory is a lot of stock that doesn't turn, and possibly a stock that you can't sell.
Yeah, that's what I was going to get to. How much of that stock is aged, discounted, seasonal? I'd be very surprised at paying face value for that.
Yeah, I mean, a business of this sort of size, kind of, sub 10 million, where they're not audited, it's kind of like they're free to do what they like with the valuation of their stock. And it's only when you get to an exit like this that someone else comes along and actually properly values it. I wonder if they're following any kind of internal robust policies about writing down the value of their stock based on speed of turn or what condition it's in. So yeah, I would suggest that's probably a point that will be attempted to negotiate by any prospective buyer. The listing, so it basically is seeking, I guess, 2 times EBITDA, which is not unreasonable, and is alluding to the fact that there is a 734k gross profit out of the 1.2 mil in revenue, which is quite impressive, actually, that a business in what you would consider to be a commodified space is making that kind of margin.
62%, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, 62%. Eh? That's none too shabby for a tool business.
Well, I mean, it definitely suggests a healthy business model. My concern here would be platform risk. There seems to be a really heavy reliance on eBay and Amazon. And I think that, I've traded on those platforms before in the past, and there is a real risk of being sort of delisted or even sort of algorithmically deprioritized. I feel like not owning a channel gives you less defensibility.
Yeah. Not just delisted, but with Amazon disintermediated, because Amazon are past masters at using their merchants to discover what has popularity and demand, and then offering an Amazon equivalent where they make the margin themselves and don't give it up to the vendor. I previously was an Amazon vendor. We went through Marketplace before, and then became a fulfillment through Amazon type operation, and you have to watch your back, frankly.
Yeah, and then are you buying a brand or are you buying an Amazon storefront? And that has implications for growth, and I would think valuation too.
Yeah, it certainly won't command a premium. I think actually you have to price in an element of risk there, because as you rightly say, they could sort of snuff you out in a heartbeat. And I don't know, I haven't probably really explored eBay as a sales channel for quite some time, but for years it had a stigma about it being more of discounted goods.
Yeah, I think some of these kind of products are actually fairly well respected to buy through eBay. I think that eBay are kind of at that adoption curve level where, you know, everybody and their mum and their grandma knows and has heard of eBay, and they kind of are a more respected storefront for some of these kind of goods. So,
Well, you'd hope when you look at this sort of business that it would have used these channels to cultivate sales through its own own e-commerce store. And it doesn't mention here, I don't think, in the listing what whether it's a big commerce or a Shopify or a Magento or whatever or store stack they're running on, which leads me to think that actually their own website might be underdeveloped and that they're hugely reliant on these two third-party channels.
Yeah, I would hope for a bit more information on that, and where their site is hosted and what kind of traffic. I mean, they talk about having high organic internet SEO ranking, but is that for their Amazon products? In which case, that isn't actually their ranking; that's Amazon's ranking. Or is their own site ranking well online? If it is, then that's excellent, and maybe they are cultivating using Amazon as a gateway and bringing them back to their main site. I would hope so. I would have liked more information on that.
Yeah, likewise. I think that's something to pick up in any due diligence here. The listing makes a couple of interesting statements. One around an enviable supply chain sourcing parts directly from renowned manufacturers and suppliers. I think that probably speaks to where the 62% gross margin is coming from, frankly, because if they've disintermediated, if they're not buying through, tool distributors and wholesalers and that kind of thing, they're getting it straight from the manufacturer, then arguably, that's where their advantage lives, and probably where they can, they've got some means to offer an attractive price in the market, but at the same time be profitable, which is the holy grail here. So I'd love to dig a bit more deeper into the robustness of those relationships, and again, is there a concentration risk just in the vendors as well? I mean, is it really that they've got a small number of manufacturers whose ranges they're representing, and that actually, if any of those manufacturers changed their policies and said, "Oh, you're now having to go through one of our wholesalers," and bang goes 20% of your margin, are they at risk there from being compressed between a rock and a hard place, if you like, of Amazon on the one hand and a manufacturer that changes its distribution policy on the other? So I'd want to price that in as a sort of risk element, to be honest. And then it talks about a strong asset base. So I'm not quite sure. They don't really talk about anything more than that. So I'd love to know what they mean by a strong asset base, because it appears that the building is leased. They have a very little in the way of capital equipment, and it mostly seems to be in inventory.
Yeah, that is interesting, and I would have loved some more information on that. When I first saw that, I automatically assumed it was, warehousing and other such things. But yeah, if that's leased, then I don't know where that asset base is coming from, unless they are referring to that stock again. Maybe,
or you go on to see in the listing that it talks about a 2,500 square foot industrial premises, which is where their officing and when warehousing and storage and distribution takes place from, which can be offered at an annual rent of 13k. So I wonder if actually the strong asset base is that the building is owned by the operator currently, but isn't being made available in the sale, in which case you would have to start looking at, well, whether that 13,000 commercial rent and, all the other bits that go with it, heating, lighting, service rates, whether that has actually been properly reflected in the P&L of the business, and whether that adjusted EBITDA actually takes cognizance of that rent, or whether it's had it rent free because it's, in the pension fund of the owner, for example.
Them owning that space actually would make sense with the fact that they've listed this as relocatable. This business could be relocated if required. Okay, yeah.
Albeit you've got two key members of staff, a warehouse assistant and an online sales manager that are obviously, I guess, based from those premises. So you'd have to deal with the sort of sensitivity of that.
Yeah, and that is a kind of operational risk, only having two full-time employees. Are the systems and staff in place to run this without the current founder/owner?
Yeah, I wonder just how much, you think about when you buy businesses like this, we could put in X amount of automation, and there could be, AI customer services, and we could streamline the fulfillment. You still need somebody to actually pick it off of a pallet racking and stick it on the back of a courier and consign it properly, and manage returns, because inevitably, especially with Amazon, returns.
Yeah, I mean, well, this was, my point with the staff is that I would be surprised if there are only 2 people picking, packing, selling 1.2 million quid's worth of stuff online every year, and managing all of the listings, photography, descriptions, customer service. That's a hell of a lot of work for 2 people.
Yeah, and I think the listing might be a little bit short on detail there, because when you look at the fact that the adjusted EBITDA, and that's adjusted, so the reported EBITDA is going to be less than this, of 230,000 on the 1.2 mil revenue. But if we've just said, look, there's 730,000 of gross profit, we know there's 13,000 effective cost of the building in there. There isn't 500,000 being paid to those 2 employees. So where's the rest of the overhead?
That's a very good question. My
mind would go to their Amazon margin perhaps being in overheads rather than cost of sales, which I think would be incorrectly accounted for in that sense. And perhaps if you inverted that, the gross margin isn't quite as healthy as it's being made out to be, because you could see Amazon fees being reported kind of below the line rather than as a cost of sale in the transaction, sure, if they were doing it this way. Because I am still struggling to get over the very healthy GP on this business, knowing that industrial tools is very kind of compressed, commodified, competitive sector. So I think there's an element there, but I would still, my mind can't work out where about 300 grand is going on the overhead of running this business. Again, could it be logistics? Could they be spending a lot of money on shipping? And again, that should probably be in COS, but is perhaps in overhead. But yeah, if you can do this with 2 members of staff, that's interesting. Alone.
I mean, they're 2 very hardworking members of staff. I'd like to know where you can find some more of those.
Quite, yeah. I mean, it might speak to the fact that the tools that they're selling are maybe more on the premium end, so maybe they're more specialized capital equipment rather than being hammers and mallets and wrenches and things.
That would make sense, because they don't have a huge warehouse space. We're talking 2,500 square feet, including offices and as well as their warehouse and storage. So it's not a huge warehouse. So maybe there are. Yeah, maybe we are looking at premium items here, and it's not so much to sell.
Yeah, also need to think about stock turn. So I wonder if that 800,000 of stock, I wonder how many units that kind of translates to, because if this is kind of high value capital equipment that they're turning few of, but those items generate a sensible profit and are actually fairly efficient on floor space, and they're turning them at reasonable pace. I wonder just actually whether that means that they don't really have a lot of aging inventory, and that they use that 1,000 square foot of floor space super efficiently.
Potentially. So my question for you on this is, so we're going to come back to this kind of split of the asking price, so that the 500k for the goodwill and 850k for the stock. Is this a good opportunity for a bit of sort of deal structure alchemy, and you could negotiate the stock value separately and structure a kind of earn out or deferred payment on sale of that stock?
I think you'd have to, because I would suggest that there is some risk that the seller needs to wear. I'm surprised that Turner Butler have used the word goodwill. Goodwill is an intangible asset. Most sensible acquirers aren't paying for intangible assets.
Yeah.
So I would have said this is more just a straight multiple of EBITDA type arrangement, and in which case, 500,000 is not unreasonable. But I wouldn't call it goodwill, because that lands in the unreasonable bucket with me. The stock, definitely, I would want to price that down. I want to do what's called bucketing, where you would look at the sales information, and you would see what has transacted in volume and recently, and what has been latent and is sort of like the pig I never pay more than about 10% for the pigs, if that. And I'd only pay 100% for the stuff that's turning in the last quarter. And anything older than that, you're on a kind of like a sliding scale with your buckets of 50%, 25%, etc., etc. So
Okay.
I would be definitely bucketing this stock and not paying full price for it. On that 500,000, I would suggest, asking price wise, that there's bound to be a deferred or likely conditional earnout element on that. You could probably finance some of the stock purchase on an asset-backed arrangement.
Okay.
That might free up some capital to get the deal done. Albeit the lender would take the same approach, that they'd not want you to pay full price, and they wouldn't loan full price against the inventory. So that's one thing. I wonder where the debtors are in all this. Is this a fully cash upfront business, in which case they don't have debtors? But then what's the creditors look like? So I would be interested in the sort of the cash position post that. It doesn't speak to if there's any debt being carried. It doesn't speak to if there's any surplus cash in the deal. So I'd probably be going in thinking, look, let's try and defer about 30% of this asking price over at least a year, to sort of help wear some of the risk that may come from the sort of transition to new ownership here.
Okay, so let's talk growth opportunities. Where could we see someone improving this business after purchase? I mean, I think we touched on one already, which is if they aren't leveraging their own sales shopfront online, then that's probably the best place to start, I would say.
Yeah, I think that's a huge one. I do agree that they should get it through. They should try and convert more sales through their own channels, and not be giving up as much margin to Amazon, for example, or the eBay fees. So if they're not doing that, then that's definitely an opportunity to value engineer the upside for the acquirer.
Yeah.
You've also got to wonder about geographies. Like, is this just 1.2 million being done for supplying the UK market? What if they have got a particularly special relationship with a couple of manufacturers? Does that relationship extend to them being able to supply into Europe, for example? So is there an opportunity to grow this business through additional territories beyond their core UK territory?
Something I'm thinking as well is if you could, and it depends on maybe the relationship with the manufacturers, but if someone took this on and they had some marketing experience and they knew how to do this kind of thing and they could build up their own storefront presence, there's a potential to convert this into an actual D2C brand, and have your own tool rather than being a kind of shop front for other people's manufactured tools.
They'd have to become synonymous with sort of a value add there. So
yeah,
are they the sort of knowledge experts in whatever the process is that relates to this product, or are they really great kind of service center to keep the kit running, post warranty? Or do they do planned preventative maintenance? Yeah, it could be that there's some value added surface element to this if they become the synonymous own D2C or B2B, whatever it'll be, brand supplying this kit and servicing this kit. There could be an upsell opportunity there. I'd also think from a cash utilization perspective, like if the inventory isn't already optimized, could it be better optimized? I mean, if they're doing this on 2,500 square foot, great. But what if they weren't? If you had some good predictive technology in your ledgers, you could probably work out what your optimal stock really looks like and not keep overstocked. Anything else you want to say around it? It seems otherwise, pretty bog standard and a business, I would say, worthy of consideration.
I would say that if you are a first-time buyer and you're looking at this business, go back and listen to our episode about the first call with the seller and take some advice there, because I think that's really where a lot of this information is going to be unearthed. I think that it's definitely worth consideration, but there's a lot of detail missing from this, as there always are in these listings. But there's some stuff that I think if you could find that out fairly early on, you could know within a phone call or two whether this was worth buying, I think.
Yeah. So if you had a cool $750,000 in your back pocket burning a hole, would you buy this business?
So we didn't buy or pass. I think I would pass. I think that there is definitely a good business here, and they've obviously got great profit margin. I don't think I have quite enough information, and I'm still quite hung up on the channel risk and the over reliance on Amazon and eBay. That doesn't quite sit right with me. So for me, I'm afraid I think it's going to be a pass.
Okay. Well, I'm going to take the other side of the coin, and I'd request a sim on this because I think there might be some legs. The profitability interests me. I'm intrigued to know a bit more about what kit it is they actually are distributing. But a business making this sort of money is always worth having a look at, particularly if they could sort of wean off the Amazon and eBay drugs and own more of their distribution channel and make more of the margin themselves. That could be a nice quick way to improve your return on equity. So, okay. Well, there we are. We're at an impasse, 1 for, 1 against. But if we were an investment committee, Alfie, we'd need someone else on this call to have the casting vote. So in the absence of consensus, we'll have to pass.
Maybe we can do that with our listeners. So anybody listening in, drop us a comment and give us a buy or pass, and we'll collate the results and see which way it goes.
And we'll let you know how we got on with it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, and also while you're commenting, let us know if you like this format, if you feel that it's the sort of thing you want us to do again in reviewing some opportunities out there in the wild and talking about what we do with them or to them. Great. Well, thank you for joining us. Alfie, any closing comments?
Keep on crunching.
Why say more? Keep on crunching, guys. Keep on crunching.